Angela, you work at the intersection of emotional health and high performance. In your experience, how much does someone's inner emotional state impact their outer financial success? And why do so many women miss this link?
That's a great question. It's really everything. And if we look at what's even deeper underneath that, it's really about the subconscious beliefs that you hold. So, for example, if you grew up in a family where money was scarce or it was really hard to come by, you probably either um, were told this directly or you observed this, but it's like, money, I have to work hard for money, or this isn't for us, this is for them, or something like that had taken hold in your brain. Again, we're not 100% aware of this until we do some inner work, but that belief system then shapes your thoughts, the lens with which you see the world, your emotions, and your behaviors. So I think about, the differences between families who were really raised in money and very comfortable with it. This was an expectation. We make money, we continue to make money, right? And so, people sometimes will have this thought process like, I'm a good person, I should be making money, and you're right, like we kind of equate some of those things like good and bad. It doesn't matter, right? If you've got the belief system that this is an expectation or this is something that is normal or familiar, that's what's going to continue. If having money is not normal or familiar, that's what's going to continue. So it's really about the deeper belief systems that impact your thoughts and emotions going forward. And it's easily missed because we're not aware unless we go digging in there for some reason.
So you coach women who look like they have it all together, but they still feel stuck inside. So what's one sneaky money belief you would see come up again and again with these high achieving women?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And I can speak to my own experience as well. But I think a lot of times there's a deeper belief of, I'm not good enough that comes in. And that's a pretty generalized human wound. We all have had maybe that thought process or, those emotions or insecurities come up in some way, shape, or form. The degrees of intensity differ, but really it can be something like that, or I'm a failure, or I have to work hard to get what I want. Those are some of those common beliefs that may have come from a previous incident that are coming in now that may affect individuals, the way that they spend the money that they make. Even if they're making a great amount of money, they spend, or it can be that they're running a business, but they're running themselves into the ground to try to hit a certain financial threshold. And again, it stems back from those beliefs. There's also some belief systems like where I was talking about, having to spend, even if you're making a lot of money, you're not keeping it because you're spending it. There's a belief system about, um, you know, or an experience where it again doesn't feel familiar to keep it, or there's negative beliefs about people who do have a lot of money. So people who are rich are evil, right? So that could have been something from a grandparent or something like that that's stuck in your brain when you were younger. And so that could be the root of why these things are happening, these behaviors are happening, is because way back in the back of your brain, I don't want to be evil. I'm a good person, right? But that is working counter to your goal, which is to be financially free.
How often do you find there's a correlation? You work with high achieving leaders and you help them to elevate their potential so they can achieve their dreams. How often do you find that these high achieving people are trying to like kind of fill something in themselves that they may not be able to identify? Like, is it money? Is it a title? Is it something? And it's almost like they're trying to fill up their cup, but the cup has a hole in the bottom of it. So it's never enough. It's never good enough.
Yeah. All the time is the answer. So it's very fascinating. So coming from the mental health background and being able to do the very complex work that I do with my clients, in the coaching space and in the therapy space, we really find some amazing discoveries. I had a person that I worked with recently who talked about how she had a business, a brick and mortar business. There was a terrible tragedy that happened to the building, and she just, everything kind of cascaded and crumbled as a result. And as a business owner, as a high achiever, like, we want things to work perfectly, if not well, right? And so when those things crumble, we have to really have the ability to emotionally regulate and process these things out. And then sometimes we don't process these events that happen to us. And so it could be, an event that happened, in the recent past, or it could be something, again, that happened in childhood. Just the way that, we were brought up to, again, not only just think about money, but have a relationship with ourselves. When I have clients who, are working hard, and they're always striving, that's the term that we use, striving to get to the next thing without celebrating or taking a break or whatever. They are trying to compensate a lot of times. And really what's going on in the brain is it's trying to protect you, actually, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's trying to protect you from being hurt or rejected. That's why we continue to get the certifications, take the courses, buy the bags, go in debt with things that make us look a certain way, because we're missing something, right? Whether we were missing the love and care and connection that we needed in the past, the words of affirmation, the support, the ability to regulate ourselves, all of that plays into it. So there's a lot of complex pieces there.
So that's interesting. And you blend your background of therapy and coaching together very nicely. But when you speak with someone, how do you even get to, well, you see all this stuff you like to buy? That's really filling, that's trying to fill in something else, a deep, how do you get there? And I'm assuming you can't be that blunt with it, or can you? How do you say that to
It depends
someone?
on the client, but also the level of self awareness that an individual comes in with too. Sometimes they come in and they're like, you know what? I know I'm doing this. This isn't making me happy. What the heck, right? So I'm like, okay, well, here's step one. Here's step two. Let's connect the dots. So sometimes it is that simple, but sometimes when we're not fully aware of the cycle and the system, there's a lot of education that goes on the front end. So what I do is teach individuals how their brain works, how their nervous system works, and kind of let them identify some of those things and why they're working in the way that they are. So that's kind of a general piece. If you want to give me an example, I'm happy to walk through it with you. So we can kind of get there.
Yeah, yeah. Give me an example of someone maybe you've worked with recently, or a very, like, something that that's common. Like you said, like you buy all the bags, or you do all this. Like, what does some of this stuff mean?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, there's a few different lenses and layers that we look at. Again, we process through the world, right? So I would ask first, what is your definition of success if we were to take away all of the societal influences, right? If you didn't have a TV, if you didn't have, right, X, Y, and Z, like, what would that look like for you? Because some people don't give themselves the permission to say, you know what, I just want to buy some really high quality sweatsuits and, be able to have a nice couple vacations a year and I'm good, right? Like, or whatever that may look like. It may not be the stuff, right? It may be something different. It may be, I want to pay for my child to go to private school, and maybe I get to work part-time instead of full-time, or what, right? It literally can look any way that you want. And so I've been in circles where some people, like, really, you would not guess that they're a multimillionaire or a millionaire by the way that they present. And again, that's a great challenge to right, the societal picture. So there's that piece of first defining, like, what is it that you really actually want without all these other noises and inputs in your brain. So when we're trying to go after stuff, okay, what is that stuff going to give you, or what do you think it's going to give you? And then if you get the stuff or have the stuff, how does that actually feel? So we're going to come in alignment with the ideal, the reality, and then we understand, okay, so if that's not doing the trick for you, what do you think is missing, right? A lot of the work that I do too is based somatically of the body. And so, when I ask a client, why do you think that you are in debt with all these clothes, all these bags, whatever? What's going on for you when you're shopping? And, they'll tell me, oh, well, sometimes I'll give myself a little treat when I'm stressed or whatever. Okay, great. Where do you feel that stress in your body? So now we're taking it not just from here, but we're taking it into our body. Our body doesn't lie. Our body tells us stuff all of the time. So if you have headaches, if you have shoulder pain, if you've got chest pressure, if you've got stomach rumbles, right? All of that is information that your body's telling you something, whether it's originated in your physical or in your mental, emotional state. So usually then we'll get to, oh, well, I'm stressed, so I get some chest tension. Okay, so let's actually take that chest tension, focus on it, and let's follow that back to another time when you've noticed that chest tension. And that might lead us to a memory of, well, when I was at school, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so I was made fun of for not having nice clothes, right? So, okay, what's the belief behind that? Oh, well, that is, I'm not good enough. And there's the loop, right? We have an experience that is impactful or semi-traumatic or however you want to label that stayed with that individual, that caused pain. And then the solution is to try to distract away from that pain, right? That's why we have addictions the way that we do: shopping, Netflix, whatever your addiction is, drugs, alcohol, whatever. That's because we're trying to distract away from pain that has not been resolved. And so you saw how I did that loop, going back to what is that belief? What is that origin story for this behavior? And then we work on resolving that.
And then how do you resolve it? Like, do you then, I mean, because obviously it's going to take, a long time to get over it. Like, you can say, well, obviously that's not true, or those kids in fourth grade were mean, and, you've already proved them wrong, or whatever you're trying to do. Like, if you're trying to prove them wrong, or if you're trying to, fill yourself up, I never want to have that feeling again, so I'm buying all this stuff. Then how do we start to undo it? Because that's a very legit, like that. I mean, that everyone could probably have a story about that, whether it's the clothes they wear or their physicality or anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and as an adult, we can kind of sit back and go, yeah, you know what, that was really hurtful and mean. And sometimes kids know what they say, and sometimes they don't know what they say. And we don't realize as a child that some of the mean things we say can carry on with someone for the rest of their lives. So we can kind of like talk it out and like say, like, all right, like, you're an adult now, like you're a big boy, you're a big girl. Let's move on from it. But it's sometimes really hard. So how do we undo what was done?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's elements of healing in there, right, that need to happen. So just saying the words, okay, well, you can let that go now, that does nothing, right? It does nothing. Okay, like maybe sometimes we need to have some verbal permission to give ourselves the permission to let that go. But there's deeper work involved. So when we're doing the work in our sessions, we're looking at, maybe some inner child healing exercises. We're looking at, some visualization. We're looking at those body sensations, the senses that happened, the feelings by processing. Sometimes people have never talked about this in their entire life. And so just sitting in there, right? So we allow that to be processed in a way that feels comfortable for that person, depending on And right, we're looking at also through a therapy lens or a coaching lens. How does that look? With therapy, we're really looking at healing past hurts on those deeper levels and using more therapeutic tools. And with coaching, it's usually we're looking more at the present and going forward, but also, a little bit of that backstory to inform, what's happening going forward. But the real, as we're doing the work in sessions, the real work is being able to come into alignment with your truth, being able to speak that out loud, being able to visualize a different result, being able to put yourself in a place of more empowerment than disempowerment, to summarize the work that we do behind the scenes.
Is there an age? Well, first I'll ask, do most people that come to you are they dealing with trying to address some things that happened in childhood or they may not realize it happened in childhood, but they're coming to you like, here's my issue, here's my roadblock, here's what I'm dealing with. And then through your work, you identify, okay, there was something that happened in childhood. How many people, what percentage of your clients would you say like, yes, it was a childhood thing that happened to them?
Um, I'm gonna guess like 80 to 90%. I would say there's some origins there. Um, More so, the therapy clients are usually ones that are like, I'm here to process the messed up stuff that happened in my past. Great, let's go for it. With coaching, it's a little different because maybe those folks have already done some of the therapy work, that foundation, and they're looking now to be able to say, okay, now I'm here, standing here, I feel pretty good most of the time. It's just I've got this one like thing that I'm just really blocked from. I feel maybe a hesitancy or disturbance or what is that? Some resistance in my body or in my behavior, and I'm not really sure. And sometimes we can just pinpoint the origin, and they're like, oh yeah, new level unlocked, right? Because they've done a lot of that foundational work. So when you're going into coaching, I do recommend either having a therapist kind of like on call on availability, or having already kind of done some of that back work. Because sometimes we do still find that there is a little bit of stuff from the past, and there are some figuring out the boundaries, right, of what's therapy, what's coaching. But usually it can be something that can be addressed depending on the severity again. Because sometimes if it's trauma related, we're tapping into a lot of connected networks in your brain, your neural networks, that then have generalized to a bunch of things. So that takes a lot more complexity of the work, and that's more of a therapeutic approach.
Do you find there's like a common age where something happens to a child? We use the example of something mean was said, or
Mm-hmm.
it could it be like these one or two off comments?
Middle
Do you
school.
find there's a common age when something happens and it sticks with you?
I pretty much everybody. We've got one memory that comes from middle school, at least those formative years. So I would say between like honestly, probably 7 to about 15 are those really important. I have had clients remember all the way early as age 2. So that is also something to consider. But yeah, it's typically at least everybody's got at least one thing in middle school that happened that was like, ugh, yuck, this is still haunting me, or I need to work through this.
Yeah, and it's such a shame because I think a lot of times, because I have children in those ages, you don't even realize what you're saying when you're a kid. A lot of times you may not even realize what you're saying. You're still trying to like figure things out and, what can I get away with? What can I? You don't necessarily understand what's hurtful yet or what it. So it's like it's almost a pity too, because a lot of times if these kids actually knew what they said or like what it meant, they probably didn't mean to say it the way they did or say the words and they take it back in an instant. But it's just like it just shows you how powerful words are, and it can affect someone for the rest of their life.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of times when I'm hearing some of these memories, what it sounds like is that some of the other peers, and again, this happens from adults too, right? People in authority, teachers, right? But it just sounds like some people are reacting. They're repeating what they've been told or what they know, or they're hurt, and that's kind of what's spilling out. So there's a lot of pieces there of awareness, really.
So going back to the financial part of it, because we are talking money here. So say a woman listening right now knows she deserves more financially, but still feels paralyzed or guilty chasing it. What's one practice you give clients to bridge that emotional gap?
Absolutely. I actually have a free resource on this. I can share it with you to put in your show notes if you'd like. But basically, what that does is has us guided in a guided way, look through the money story, the money blueprint that we have grown up with. So, what are the thoughts and feelings that come up when you think about money? What was said to you when you think about making, about making more money? Are those people evil? Does that not work for us? Like, what is that? And then there's a lot, I think, an extra layer being a mom, right? Because there's mom guilt on top of everything else. We know that, living in general, middle class stuff, getting more expensive. And so, a lot of it, two parent family homes have to work, single moms. I mean, I don't even know how, right? But like all of this stuff is happening, plus mom guilt. And it's like, okay, well, what am I, we need to live, what's happening, right? Like there's so many layers here. But specifically for women too, that extra question, that extra layer of, as a woman, what does it mean for me to make more money? What do people think about me? How do I feel about the way that people think about me, or what is said about women who make money? I remember there was a growing up, there was a pretty successful like mom in one of the groups, and I remember hearing about her something really negative about her making money, and I still remember it. I still remember that moment, that memory, and I'm like, wow, like it seemed like a really an offhand comment, but really you're right. Like the power of words, it's very fascinating. So it's also very important for us to be very careful about how we frame wealth and how we're talking about money around our children. I know I try really hard. My baby's only, he's about to be 2, but I'm still trying to be very mindful about how I speak about it in front of him, not only for, for him, but for us in general. But you know what I mean? It's like, cause we sometimes will not even be aware, but we're speaking the words of our parents or the society or whatever, that we have just kind of taken in. So it's just being mindful on so many fronts on that.
So you alluded to it right now, but you talk a lot about impact, so specifically generational impact. So how do you help women connect their financial power to a deeper legacy that cultivates? No, sorry. I was like, that's not the word. Sorry, I
Yeah,
can't read.
that's okay.
Um, so you talk a lot about impact, specifically generational impact. How do you help women connect their financial power to a deeper legacy that outlives them?
Yeah. So I think about actually, I think about, you know, our ancestors, first of all, right? Like where did we come from? What happened? What was passed down, right? So we when my grandmother passed away, she passed down her home. My grandfather stayed in it for a bit, and then it was passed down into the family. So I'm like, wow, that's a really great gift. But then what happens when that home is no longer available? What happens, right, when the individuals who own it, currently my parents, maybe they don't want it anymore, or maybe whatever. So it's like, what do we need to do to think bigger picture about how we're leaving a legacy? And first of all, what does legacy mean to you? So for me, what I would love to be able to set up as some of those, you know, wealth builders that can be passed down, can be utilized, right? So my business being one of them, right? So being able to either set that up to sell or to gift, right? To pass down, allow my family to work in that business, right? So that's something that can help kind of in the here and now and maybe in the future. When if we want to really want to go into it, and I'm not a financial professional, so take that with a grain of salt. But if we're thinking about, what's going on with the estate, right? Is there a trust set up, right? Like, so it's like all of these things that I was not familiar with as far as growing up. These conversations weren't had. These things weren't maybe put into play. And so it's like, it's really learning, like what is available to protect my family, not only now, but going forward in the future, so that my family doesn't have to worry about finding money to, take care of me if I have medical issues, or, bury me or things like that. That's real stuff that had to be figured out. As I was growing up, looking around, like that was stuff that needed to be figured out. And so it's kind of like, what does that look like for you? And a lot of times we look at kind of what was done or not done in the past to inform that going forward. Does that help? I think there's so many ways you can, create a legacy, whether that's scholarship, whether that's, having a building named after you, programs, companies, whatever. There's so many different ways to do that. Just writing a book would be one of mine too, one of my dreams that I'm like, yeah, this is great. We can, kind of pass that down and spread information widely, right? But yeah, those are just some ideas that come to mind for me. But I would encourage everyone listening, what does that mean for you?
That's so true, because what a legacy can mean so many different things. You mentioned like a scholarship, or, your business and teaching your children your business, and then they can step in. There's so many more ways to leave an impact versus just like leaving money to someone. Right. And, when speaking with people, they start to get very focused on, well, I want to make sure I leave money to my children or to my grandchildren. It's like, well, there are other things you can do, right, that can be impactful to them, and maybe even set them up better than just leaving them like a plop of money, or having that be the focus. Instead, shifting your focus, like how you talked about earlier, what's important to you when it comes to your career, what have you. I saw like a quote that popped up on like Instagram or something, and it was like, instead of wanting to emulate the person with the designer bag and the big house and the C-suite title, you might want to start looking after emulating the person that's able to pick up their kid every day at 3 o'clock. Like that might be the real flex. But like, what is the flex for you? Like, what one person's aspiration is not the other. So sitting back and like really just sitting in, asking yourself questions that I think sometimes we just automatically assume because that's what everyone else is doing, right? But what does it mean to you?
That's a great point. I think also in general, there is just a lack of um, really sitting and reflecting, right? Because we have so many inputs. We're barraged, right? Radio, TV. I mean, anywhere you look, right? We can be barraged by information, opinions, things like that. And so I would say, as much as you can, go connect with nature, be in the quiet, be in the stillness, um, sit with yourself and ask yourself these questions. Like that is the really important thing, because then you're going to be guided by your own vision. And when we get other people's voices in our head, sometimes that impacts what we're thinking and going after, but that may not be aligned for us. The other thing I want to add about legacy is something that's very important to me. And it's so funny because it's like, to me, this is a very obvious thing, but I didn't say it out loud. What's very important to me is working on myself personally, mentally, emotionally, so that I can pass down these skills, stability and security of feeling in my son, and for him to be able to, have a regulated nervous system and know how to do that, know what that means, and just really have a lot of that emotional intelligence. So to me, that's also a part of the legacy, because what we do ripple impacts. I mean, even in some of my therapy sessions or whatever sessions I have, sometimes my clients will be like, oh, thank you so much for telling me about this. I told my so and so, my friend, my partner, whatever, and now they're trying it and they're really, I'm like, this is it, right? This is the ripple impact. That's what I always talk about. That's so important to the work that I do, and it drives me as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like talking about money, right? I mean, you're saying, you're helping your son to develop a high emotional intelligence, and just reacting to things appropriate. It's there's so much to that, and you can't measure that, right? It's intangible. You can't measure it. Just like people pass down their money thoughts, their money feelings onto their child. So being aware of what you're saying and how you're reacting, and knowing that there's these little humans around soaking all of it in, and they are the mirror. As much as you don't like to admit it, they are your mirror sometimes. I think that's really important. But you said before about limiting the noise, and I am so guilty of this. I mean, I can't do anything without an AirPod in my ear, like cleaning the house, straightening up, set a timer for 20 minutes. I put an AirPod in, I'm running around doing everything. I'm in my car. I'm always listening to something. And you have to purposefully turn everything off and like just sit there. And there'll be some times where I get in my car and I'm just thinking, and I didn't hook up my phone and put on my podcast, or I didn't turn on the radio, and I don't realize it almost till like I'm halfway to where I need to be, because my mind's just going. But it's good because it's almost like it's like exercise, like it's running its marathon. It's kind of going through all the things that it needs to go through so then I can chill out for a moment. But if I don't give myself that time and I'm always having someone else's voice in my ear, it doesn't, I never get that marathon out of my system.
Yes. Your brain is built to process, right? So allow it to have that space. And for folks that are, wondering some tips on how to do that a little bit more, I would say like whatever time is your time. So making number one, making some quiet time for yourself. But for me, it's in the morning. I drop my baby off, and I call him a baby. He's not a baby anymore. It's big toddler baby. Anyway,
I have
but
6-year-olds. They're still babies. It's fine.
I know, but it's about asking yourself, like, do I need to sit and process, or I need to think some things through today, or do I want to listen to some music? Or it's really asking yourself this. And I encourage my clients, like, even to when you wake up in the morning, hey self, need anything today, right? I tell my clients to talk to themselves. I think I'm hilarious, but it works, right? It's intentionally checking in to see, where are you at, right? Are you just overwhelmed and your brain is buzzing? Like, no inputs, right? Until we kind of write that out, get that out, talk that out, whatever you need to do. And the other part is when we are in silence, sometimes that brings up the icky, hard stuff that needs to get processed too. And that's what people really don't like, because it's uncomfortable and hard. But get someone to process that with you, whether that is a therapist, a coach, and don't stop at one if they're not great. It's kind of like dating. You got to find the right fit, but I really encourage you to find that support if that's something that comes up and that's hard.
And I feel like that the advice that is given, that okay, we need to stop and think and let our brains like go in whatever direction, it automatically goes to the extreme, kind of like the same way with money. Like, okay, well, you need to cut back on your spending, stop buying your coffee. And it's like, whoa, that's like the best part of my day. Like, why are you going to tell me I can't do this? Or like, it sounds ridiculous because it's not applicable. I always hear like, well, you need to start meditating. And I'm like, I can't even go 5 minutes in my own thoughts. You want me to go sit down like in a room by myself and just meditate? Like, that sounds crazy. Like there's it's way too steep of a climb for me to be where I am now to all of a sudden start meditating. Right. So then what happens? I just don't do it. Right. So I think finding, like you said, that minute of where can you do this? Where can you just take a couple of minutes and kind of let your brain unwind?
And just asking yourself too, like, what is it that I need? Do I need to sit and write everything out? Sometimes, usually I'll get up and get started for the day, but sometimes I have to come in and immediately write down my to-do list because it's already going. So that helps me because I know it's somewhere and it doesn't have to be in my brain. So I allow it to just kind of go and be elsewhere, and then I can go back to being mindful in the moment. So yeah, I think that's also a piece, is just asking, like, hey, what is it that you need? That could be a simple first question. And if that's hard, that's okay. Get some support to help you work out those things too, because you don't have to do it by yourself.
Exactly. Find the thing that works best for you, listen to some of the advice, but don't implement something that doesn't fit. You don't make a square peg fit in a round hole. So if writing your to-do list makes you feel better versus going and meditating or doing yoga for an hour, do that. And that's your dump. Just like, with money, if it's not realistic that I'm going to stop buying my coffee, find something else that works for you. If you feel like things are a little bit tight or you need to make some financial changes.
Mm-hmm.
So for the listener who's checking all the boxes, okay, I feel like I have I'm doing well in my career. I'm achieving what I want to achieve. I feel like I have a healthy relationship with money and, all of these things, but they're still playing small, whether it is with their career, whether it is with their money. What's one brave move she can make this week to break that pattern of playing small?
Mm. I would say the first thing we do, whether we're in a therapy session or a coaching session, is we assess, right? So I would love for you to assess what is happening and why, and where did that come from. So again, when as I talked about that money mindset resource that I'm going to share, that is another opportunity for you, and you can change the subject of those questions, right? When you walk through that assessment, is looking at, what does it mean to take a bigger risk or take a bigger action? A lot of times my high achievers are worried about getting burned out because maybe they have been burned out before. This was me. And so that fear of the energy that's going to need to be expended by expanding is usually what's holding someone back. It could be something else, 100%, but that is one of those common things that I find. So it's really asking yourself through. Okay, let's play it out, right? That's something we do in our sessions. Okay, so you're worried about taking that next step. Let's actually look at what that would entail, because sometimes it'll feel too big, kind of like you said, making that transition to 5 minutes meditation feels too big. So we're shutting that down. A confused brain says, no, I don't really know, how I'm going to be able to do that. Let's make it very clear. Okay, so expanding the company might mean X, Y, and Z, or expanding your career might mean X, Y, and Z. How can you put support in place for yourself? Maybe that's hiring somebody at home. Maybe that's hiring a coach or a therapist. Maybe that's whatever to support you through this time, because we know that we can do hard things, and that growth period is usually where it's hard because it's new and unfamiliar. So telling yourself too, this is just unfamiliar. I'm going to learn it, I'm going to figure it out, and then it's going to be fine. Just like riding a bike, brushing my teeth, right? We had to all learn that at some point. This is why I love having a young kid, because I can really bring it down to these very basics where we started, because we're learning how to brush your teeth, go to the bathroom, right? All of those things. We all had to learn that at some point. It's the same thing, just at a different level, but it feels bigger, right? Because there's more at stake now, and that makes sense. But figuring out what would it really truly look like, and how can I support myself in this journey?